Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. As many of you know, I make a point of keeping the channel as nonpartisan as possible, by which I mean doing things like simulations that are done by computer with no input by me at all, other than copying pasting data into a spreadsheet. Because of that, I generally make a point of not getting into the specific politics of elections, just the elections and election news itself. This morning, news broke of a nature that was both political and election news, and I had to make a decision about whether to address it. Since this channel is exclusively about elections, and the news was about whether to have one, I decided that a video was warranted. This will also be kind of slapdash to hurry up and get it out, so if you've come here for the Oscar-worthy visuals and graphics, I would suggest waiting until the next video. The news I'm speaking of was in regards to a tweet by President Donald Trump floating the idea that the 2020 elections should be postponed. This is a topic that many people and YouTubers, not to suggest that YouTubers aren't people, have covered regarding the likelihood of such a thing happening. All of it from a partisan perspective, usually. And even presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden made a statement to the effect that he expected the president to try. As with every video I make, I'm not here to confirm nor deny, or criticize nor offer cover for other people's opinions. I deal with information that is available, and that's all. It's not my job to make anyone feel better about their opinions. So this is based solely on fact. No president, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, Socialist, or from the planet Rigel 7, can cancel or postpone a federal election. No presidential election has ever been postponed, be it for war, pandemic, or safety concerns. As an example, the Civil War and the oft-mentioned Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 all had federal elections take place in the middle of them. So anyone who says that the nation hasn't faced an election in these types of conditions is either ignorant of history or just flat out lying. The date of that vote is written in law, period. Therefore, the only way to postpone or cancel an election would be through an act of Congress, because federal law specifically states that all federal elections must be held on the first Tuesday in November. So what about the states? If any state tried to delay the election, it would have to be a state where the governorship, state legislature, and state senate were all the same party, and have a large enough majority to overcome any defectors, because, believe me, there will be defectors, or a governor's veto should the governor be a member of the opposite party. Those that do are going to be sued, and probably forced to have it anyway. Those that don't would still have elections, which would mean a rolling election rather than an election day. But that's still an election, and it would only require 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. It doesn't say every state has to vote for the election to count, just that one candidate receives 270 electoral votes to win, meaning the only kind of death and taxes level of definite here is a bunch of voters and politicians on both sides of the aisle will be royally pissed off that they weren't allowed to be part of the election, and in the case of the politicians, may have lost their jobs. So that takes care of the day of the election, but what about the year? There's even less wiggle room for that. Where Election Day is federal law, the U.S. Constitution is the root of the presidential election, being held every 4 years, and that's because the length of the term is set in the document. Section 1 of the 12th Amendment specifically states that the president and vice president's term ends at noon on January 20th, 4 years after taking office. That means 4 years from the day that they take their oaths, the president and vice president's term is over, done, kaput. This is not beholden to someone being ready to take over following an election, and that includes there not being one. Changing that would require more than just a simple majority in the House, nor the 60 votes in the Senate currently required to proceed. It would require 2/3 of both houses to pass a constitutional amendment. For those keeping score, That's 290 votes in the House and 67 votes in the Senate. And then 2/3 of the 50 state legislatures, also known as 34, to ratify it before it would take effect. That is a process that, at best, takes years. We're 100 days from Election Day. Not going to happen. But for shits and giggles, let's talk about what would happen in that scenario anyway. The order of succession, which is also federal law and can only be changed by Congress, states the order goes Vice President, who has already been forced to relinquish their title by this point, and then the Speaker of the House. Since the above scenario has some states having elections and others not, the ones holding elections, which would be overwhelmingly Democratic strongholds, would be the only ones allowed to seat their representatives in the House on January 3rd, when the Constitution says they have to convene. Therefore, they are the only ones allowed to vote for the speakership, meaning the Speaker of the House of Representatives will almost assuredly be Nancy Pelosi, officially making her acting President of the United States at noon on January 20th. The Constitution, in such a situation, puts the requirement of picking a president in the lap of the House of Representatives, the now most likely Democratic-dominated House of Representatives. Something the Republicans who do manage to get elected might not care for very much. Since the Constitution calls for each state in the House to have one vote, and it's highly unlikely that Democratic-controlled states are going to cancel their elections, most members of the House will be Democrats, meaning Joe Biden would probably be elected president. The Senate would control picking the vice president. This scenario also makes it very likely that New York Senator Chuck Schumer, currently minority leader, would get a promotion to majority leader, which virtually guarantees that regardless of who the House picks as president, the vice president will be a Democrat. Something else the Republicans might not be too crazy about. The moral of this story is that old sports adage is right. You can't win if you don't play. But what about faithless electors, you might ask? Well, this year, the Supreme Court already unanimously ruled that states can set any penalties they want for not voting the way the voters say they want them to vote. The states that don't already have it would pass legislation threatening a lifetime in jail or worse so fast that it'll make everyone's head spin. So you're going to be hearing a lot of freaking out from some people about this. But the simple fact is there is no legal way for the White House to cancel Election Day, and any attempt would require the help of a Congress that has no intention of working together to help them. The founders wrote the Constitution in such a way to avoid someone swooping in and then decided they liked the place so much they didn't want to leave. Remember, the rules for this were written at a time when there was a strong fear that someone could come in, take control of the armed forces, and declare themselves king. They were painfully aware of the types of things people might do, and as such added as many fail-safes as they could possibly think of in case someone decided to try and outstay their welcome. The number of moving parts that would have to move in unanimous unison are too great, and it was designed that way. Turns out the founders were pretty smart in regards to this. Or paranoid, either way, both works. In conclusion, no. Election Day is not and isn't going to be canceled nor postponed because Democrats won't go for it, Republicans don't want Nancy Pelosi sworn in as President of the United States, and politicians of both parties nationwide would like to keep their jobs, making them very likely to support having an election on time.